welcome to this week's edition of World Today, where we'll take you through the latest developments in Myanmar regarding the coup and the status of Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh. India and China have decided to disengage at the border in eastern Ladakh, and France has passed a new anti-radicalism bill amid much criticism. After months of eyeball-to-eyeball confrontation between India and China, disengagement has finally begun. A lot is at stake, not just for the two countries, but also regionally and globally, with most of the major powers heavily invested in ensuring de-escalation of tensions. Now, while the visuals of Chinese troops moving back are unprecedented and near fantastic, there is more to it than meets the eye. From feeling the heat of economic sanctions by India to the new Biden administration vowing to stand by New Delhi, there have been many factors for China to consider. Earlier, I spoke with Jeff Smith, research fellow at the Heritage Foundation, who spoke on the disengagement process. Listen into what he had to say. After the 9-month-long standoff between India and China, disengagement has finally started almost under completion. I'm being joined by Jeff Smith, a research fellow of Heritage Foundation, also a very keen India-China watcher. Jeff, many thanks for joining us here on India Today. What is your reading, firstly, of the disengagement and of China withdrawing troops? Unprecedented in terms of the visuals that we see, that we're getting from our satellite images.
Well, I think it's hard to describe it as anything other than a welcome development and a good thing. You know, it's a dangerous situation when you have two militaries eyeball to eyeball over disputed territory, with real escalation risks, as we saw last June when there was sadly a deadly violence and loss of life. And these things can happen, spiral out of control, prompted by unintended consequences. And frankly, any de-escalation of the LAC right now is a good thing. And I think, you know, for India in particular, given that China had essentially seized the advantage at Pangong Lake and gained some first mover advantages, I think even a sort of mutual withdrawal in this case is an advantage for India, because if the status quo had persisted, China would have effectively entrenched its control over a gray zone that both countries had access to prior to the crisis. And so I think it's a victory for diplomacy.
Victory for diplomacy, indeed, in terms of the kind of conversations. We were looking at a 10th round of core commander level talks, but it seems like things are moving forward during a pandemic when the world and the global fight was to ensure that coronavirus is absolutely contained. Here we have an aggressive China. What do you think really was the reason or the motive behind China being so aggressive at the borders with India?
Well, I'm generally very hesitant to speculate about China's intentions because I don't know. And frankly, anyone who tells you they do know with certainty, you should probably doubt their honesty, because we don't know. All we can do is speculate. But if we don't speculate, then we have no analysis whatsoever. And so if I had to guess, the Chinese have been irritated by Indian infrastructure construction near the LAC for some time, including the DS-DBO road. They have protested to India to stop this construction. And in the past, particularly in the last 7 or 8 years, there have been other occasions where the Chinese have said, this new infrastructure is too close to the LAC. It violates our prior agreements, and you need to stop. And if India didn't stop, they would launch an incursion.
Could the change in administration in the United States of America also be one of the factors that they must have looked into?
Well, I'm going to go back to my sort of original caveat, which is that we really just don't know what factors were in play in Beijing's thinking and decision-making here. I mean, frankly, it could have been the climate in that area as much as a change in U.S. administration. I've seen nothing to suggest that the change in U.S. government was decisive in China's thinking about the LAC crisis. I think it's safe to assume that anyone in Beijing who hoped the Biden administration might mark a major departure from the Trump administration might look toward a G2, might look toward a major reset of relations, might turn its back on this idea of great power competition. I think those folks in Beijing are probably disappointed. I think some in China have realized in recent weeks that these concerns and this change in the US-China relationship is a bipartisan affair. And I think that has begun to sunk in. But whether or not that impacted the specific decision on the LAC, how much of it was Indian diplomacy, how much of it was their own difficulty operating in that climate, how much of it was a reassessment of the geopolitical costs and benefits of continuing to prolong this endeavor, those are all open questions.
All right. Jeff, on that note, many thanks for joining us indeed here in India Today. Always a pleasure. India continues to remain vigilant, but like Jeff said, not just vigilant, they'll have to watch what China is doing and what China is really up to. On that note, thank you so much for joining us.
Have a good.
In the first week of February, the world woke up to shocking news of democracy being crushed in Myanmar. With the military back in power and the political leadership under detention, it's now up to the people of Myanmar to fight the good fight for democracy. And they have been doing so despite communications being jammed by the junta, despite the tear gas shelling, and despite the water cannons. Here's
Hundreds of thousands of protesters have been blocking the streets of Myanmar cities. Taxis break down in the middle of the road, blocking traffic. Other vehicles drive slowly to create traffic jams so that government employees do not get to work. And everywhere, there are flags and placards, symbols of dissent against the military takeover of the country. On February 1st, the military in Myanmar took back power, making the civilian government irrelevant. Prominent leaders were detained and some were charged with crimes that seem out of place. Nobel Peace Prize winner Aung San Suu Kyi, the state councillor and the nation's democratic icon, has been charged with having flouted the country's Import-Export Regulation Act. She's accused of possession of unregistered walkie-talkies. And on February 16th, the military organized a virtual trial for Suu Kyi, a secret trial that even her lawyer wasn't aware of.
Aung San Suu Kyi was charged not only with one case, as we have already known, two cases. The first one is, as already mentioned, she was charged with Import-Export Act. And the second one is Disaster Management Act. Two cases against her.
While the earlier case against Aung San Suu Kyi under the Import-Export Act carried a possible sentence of a few years, under the Disaster Management Act, an accused can be held indefinitely without trial. President U Win Mint too has been charged with a case under the Disaster Management Act. The people in Myanmar are out on the streets, and unlike in the olden days under the military, this time they seem determined to continue resistance, whatever the cost. Myanmar had started a transition to democracy 10 years ago, after decades of military dictatorship. But all that seems to be over, with control back in the hands of the army. Yet there is something different in the air this time. People of Myanmar are finding common cause to resist the army coup. For now, there has not been much violence on the streets of Burmese towns and cities, but the situation remains tense as the military finds itself facing an adamant population demanding restoration of democracy. The level of passive resistance against its armed masters is unprecedented in this country. And this is a scenario that the military planners of the coup had probably not war-gamed for. For now, the demand for the release of Daw Aung San Suu Kyi is only increasing by the day.
While the people of Myanmar are protesting against the military takeover of the civilian government, the estranged Rakhine minority community, the Rohingyas, are struggling across the border in Bangladesh to find a new home away from their motherland. And now, with the military back in power in Myanmar, they have very little or no hope at all of returning to their land.
On 15 February, fourth batch of Rohingyas were taken to Bhashanchar, a newly developed island in the Bay of Bengal off Bangladesh coast. The Bangladesh government has so far relocated more than 7,000 Rohingyas to this island since the process started in December 2020.
নৌবাহিনী আমাদেরকে নিয়ে যাচ্ছে বাসনচর সেই বাসনচরে যাওয়ার সাথে সাথে আমরা বলে ভালো করে থাকতে পারি সেখানে বলে আবার নেওয়া যাওয়ার পরে আমরা থাকার জন্য বাংলাদেশ সরকার আমাদেরকে অনেক কিছু দিচ্ছে নেওয়ার জন্য আমরা যাচ্ছি আমরা বাংলাদেশ সরকারের অবদানে যাচ্ছি আমরা সেখানে সরকারের অবদানে থাকতেছি
The island has been developed to accommodate 1 lakh Rohingya Muslims. A counter-insurgency operation by Myanmar's military in 2017 escalated to mass rape, murder and the burning of villages in the Rakhine province. It drove more than 7 lakhs of Rohingya Muslims into neighboring Bangladesh. Since fleeing their homeland, Rohingyas took refuge mostly in the Cox's Bazar area, hoping to return to their country. 1st February military coup in Myanmar has dashed their hopes.
Alhamdulillah, mone kordi je ara Rohingya gun ashilam ara gozai bare sar ara rogi goi ebar last time mo jaibar asha sale tak re time mode এখন গভর্নমেন্ট আর বার্মা গভর্নমেন্টের মধ্যে একতলাফ হয়ে গিয়ে জিয়ানের যে একতলাফ হলো আর তুন আরো অশান্তি যেদিন আর আসিদে ফেরেশানি এসে ইয়াত আরো বেশ ফেরেশানি আর বলে শীতের আবাদ আছে আয় তো আবার লোটে তো এখন অনসেন্সযুক্ত হুকুমত হারিলে গেলে এই যে তত মিলিটারি হাতের মাঝে তুমি হুকুমত কি গই আর রিপ্রেজেন্টেশন কর দিয়ান আর যা কর দিয়ান মানে বিলকুল নব দিয়া নাই মনে করি যদিও হলিও এই হালতের মাঝে আর বিলকুল যাইও নবাজুম আর মিলিটারি আর যে জুলুম করছে ইয়াইও আর লুজে বেলি তার অদ জেনসাইড করি জুলুম করি বলে
Those who didn't flee in 2017 live in dire situations in Myanmar. Officials from Myanmar and Bangladesh met in January to discuss ways to start the return of Rohingyas. Bangladesh Foreign Ministry hoped the process to begin tentatively in June this year. The coup has put a question mark on any such hope for repatriation for the Rohingyas.
Welcome back to World Today. Now, the United Nations Security Council met on Wednesday to discuss one of the most crucial matters during the COVID-19 pandemic, and that is how to ensure that the pandemic is contained and there is access to vaccines in countries and regions that are affected by conflict and insecurity. The meeting, which was held virtually, highlighted the importance to combat vaccine nationalism and avoid using vaccines as leverage in diplomacy. The 15 member states concluded that COVID-19 vaccines should be considered a shared asset of the international community and delivered to countries at affordable prices, prioritizing vulnerable groups and frontline workers in combating the pandemic. The United States announced paying more than $200 million that it owes to the World Health Organization by end of February, while India gifted 200,000 doses of COVID vaccines for UN peacekeeping forces.
Can I just begin by underscoring the importance of the meeting and the issues that we're deliberating on today? We're fighting a global pandemic. We must ensure, I believe it's our mission to ensure an equitable distribution and access to COVID-19 vaccines right around the world to make sure no one is left behind. That must include the most vulnerable, including those languishing in refugee camps or indeed in war-torn conflict zones. That's the focus of our discussions today, and I very much look forward to a very constructive discussion with all of you.
After being detained and jailed for a month now, Kremlin critic Alexey Navalny appeared in court facing his defamation charges. The 44-year-old anti-corruption activist is accused of defaming a veteran who took part in a promotional video backing constitutional reforms last year. Navalny called those starring in the video corrupt stooges and traitors, but stated that it wasn't directed at the particular veteran. He says the charges against him are politically motivated. If proven guilty, Navalny faces a potentially long prison sentence along with a hefty fine. On 16th of February, a court in Bangladesh sentenced 5 members of an Islamist militant group to death for killing Bangladesh-origin US blogger Avijit Roy. A 6th man involved in the attack has been sentenced to life in prison. Avijit Roy had been outspoken in his criticism of religious extremism in Bangladesh. He was hacked to death in February 2015 while returning home from a Dhaka book fair. His wife was severely injured when she tried to confront the attackers. The police have said that the Al-Qaeda-inspired domestic extremist group Ansarullah Bangla team was behind the murders of more than a dozen secular activists and bloggers in Bangladesh. On 13th of February, a powerful earthquake, 7.3 on the Richter scale, hit the quake-prone areas of Fukushima and Miyagi prefectures of Japan. According to government reports, 12 people were seriously injured and around 141 sustained minor injuries. Locals had to be evacuated to safety zones and cleanup measures have been going on. After stepping back from royal duties in January 2020, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are yet again making headlines, this time with the announcement of pregnancy. The announcement came as a Valentine's Day surprise when the couple's spokesperson confirmed that Archie, their firstborn, is going to be a big brother. The couple also released a black and white portrait with a visibly pregnant Meghan's head resting on the prince's lap, shot by long-term friend, Nigerian-born photographer Misan Harriman.
On 16th of February, French lawmakers overwhelmingly approved a bill that would strengthen oversight of mosques, schools, sports clubs to safeguard France from radical Islamists. They say it is to ensure respect for French values. It is a landmark project of President Macron. And while in the run-up to the presidential elections, this would garner a lot of conservative votes for President Emmanuel Macron, it has indeed caused a lot of fissures as well within the French society. Here's a report.
Et c'est une dynamique aussi importante dans les quartiers populaires. Donc,
Parisians took to street protesting. On Valentine's Day, they demanded that the French government abandon a bill aimed at rooting out Islamist extremism. They feared that it could trample on religious freedoms and make all Muslims in France into potential suspects.
Le projet de loi tend à finalement criminaliser, en tout cas rendre suspect, tout citoyen de confession musulmane en fonction de sa pratique. ce qui du coup est vraiment une loi d'exception dans la République. Et là, par rapport à ça, effectivement, on peut s'inquiéter de l'état de droit. On peut vraiment s'inquiéter de ce qui est en train de se passer. Et si on veut vraiment lutter contre le terrorisme, ce qui est en train de se passer aujourd'hui n'a rien à voir avec cette lutte-là. Au contraire, elle ne va que l'aggraver, elle ne va que l'amplifier. Elle va amplifier des colères et c'est très dangereux.
Heureusement, autour de moi, j'ai des gens qui sont solidaires. Moi, je suis une femme qui défend la laïcité et qui défend le respect et les droits et de la différence. Et la laïcité, c'est vraiment ce qui nous réunit en tant que personnes différentes, peu importe en fait les croyances personnelles, puisque la religion, les appartenances doivent rester du domaine privé.
Et nous avons tout mis en œuvre pour apporter des outils et des...
2 days later, on 16 February, French lawmakers overwhelmingly approved the bill that would strengthen oversight of mosques,
capital social et culturel de départ,
schools and sports clubs to safeguard France from radical Islamists and ensure respect for French values. It has been one of French President Emmanuel Macron's landmark projects.
Nous avons proposé des améliorations.
Votant 563, exprimé 498, majorité 250, pour 347, contre 151, l'Assemblée nationale a adopté.
Unveiled on the 115th anniversary of adoption of the law, then enshrined for the separation of state and religion in France, the legislation has been branded by some on the left as an attack on Islam and as too weak by the far right.
Aux menaces qui pèsent sur notre République. Nous récusons le procès de l'opposition systématique. Nous avons voté les mesures utiles. Nous avons proposé des améliorations, la plupart refusées. Nous récusons le procès en islamophobie. Lutter contre le séparatisme islamiste, c'est protéger la liberté de culte des musulmans de France. Ces critiques infondées n'ont qu'un but: cacher le fait que votre loi se contente d'effleurer les problèmes.
Cela n'enlève toutefois rien à ce projet de loi qui, je l'ai dit, est un projet le plus courageux à ce jour. Nous nous attaquons de front à une problématique complexe et nous avons tout mis en œuvre pour apporter des outils et des réponses aux menaces qui pèsent sur notre République.
Pour 347, contre 100.
The bill passed by 347 votes to 151 in French Parliament's lower house, where President Macron's centrist ruling party and its allies hold a commanding majority. The legislation now moves to the Senate, where the centre-right opposition dominates.
That's all from me, but before I go, I'll leave you with visuals of great celebrations of a touchdown moment. NASA's Mars Perseverance rover landed safely on the red planet amid much relief and celebrations at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Southern California. The largest, most advanced rover NASA has sent to another world touched down on Mars 7 months after leaving Earth. Its landing on the Jezero crater means work can now begin on searching for evidence of ancient life on the red planet. To do this, the robot will drill and collect samples of rock and soil for analysis at a later date.
Hi everyone, Preeti Chaudhary here. Hope you like this video. For latest news and analysis, like and subscribe to the India Today YouTube channel. And don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated. Thank you for watching.